We have infiltrated your institutions of higher education. Hi, I'm Anonymous, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. Actually, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video. A bit of showmanship, but this video series is going to be dedicated to the occupation movement. I'm not going to go into the level of complexity and depth that I typically go into in my lecture series because I want to make it more accessible to a general audience. I will be creating notes. The notes, as always, are accessible by clicking the link in the description field, and I hope you enjoy the lecture series on social theory and the occupation movement. Okay, let's begin the lecture. I know for some of you this will be the first time that you're watching a lecture series that I've presented on YouTube, so let me just tell you how to navigate through the series. First thing that you want to do is you want to download the lecture notes, click the link in the description field, it'll take you to the PDF, download the PDF, use the PDF to navigate through the video lecture, make notes on the margins, blah blah blah. Second thing, if you want, I would recommend to go get this book, Social Theory. It's a very, very thick book. It's the third edition. This is the book that I'm going to be using. I want to give you access to the original text, so I'm using this book, but we're only going to be using excerpts because all of the original text would be volumes thick. I mean, this is thick in itself, right? So if you want to go get a copy, I've provided a link in the first video to the book. This is the book that we'll be using. And then as I go along, I'll write the section title on the board, which will correspond to the section heading number in the notes. And this is how we'll navigate through the lecture series. The lecture series, I'm not going to go into the level of complexity or depth that I do in most of my lecture series, because I recognize my whole reason for doing this is to make a contribution to the occupation movement. As I said before, I classify myself as a virtual facilitator. I'm not an organizer, I'm not necessarily a participant, but I have documented my experiences at the occupation movement, and it has affected me. And I wanted to give the theoretical sort of framework with which this cyclical process, because as we'll see as the lecture series goes on, this is what this is, this cyclical process of social revolt, social transformation, sort of the template that it takes. So I actually want to begin today with an excerpt from Max Horkheimer's Notes on Science and the Crisis. It's section 1 in the notes, and with that, let's begin the analysis. So this is Occupy Wall Street. And I got a message from Nick. So Nicholas, I got markers, and I got different colors. So I have been listening. All right. So the first section, section 1. What we're going to attempt to do is analyze the section, again, as I said, an excerpt from Max Horkheimer's Notes on Science and the Crisis. It's in this book. I've included block citations from the book in case you don't have access to the book. I've gone on Amazon. The book is very cheap, so you can get a copy of the book for yourself. It's a great resource. The whole point of the series is to give you the historical and theoretical framework with which these various authors wrote, talk about the importance of social theory within that framework, and then finally make it context specific to the occupation movement. And this is just my suggestions. Again, as I said, I'm not going to go into the level of complexity that I normally would, because I want to keep those viewers who are interested engaged. Okay, so 10 steps to understanding science as a means of production. So 10 steps to understanding science as a means of production. Okay, first thing that we want to do is I want to read this quote from the excerpt of Notes on Science in the Crisis. The quote is the following, quote, in the Marxist theory of, hold on a second, quote, in the Marxist theory of society, science is regarded as one of man's productive powers. So in the Marxist theory of society, science is regarded as one of man's productive powers. In varying ways, science, has made the modern industrial system possible. It's quite obvious, right? Science has made the modern industrial system possible. Insofar as science is available as a means of creating social value. So basically, before we get into it too much, we have social value, and we have science as the means to getting to social value, right? Science as a means of creating social value. That is, insofar as it takes shape in methods of production, it constitutes a means of production, right? So what Horkheimer is saying here is that science is a means of production. I'll explain what that is in a second. I'll also explain how this pertains to the Occupy movement contemporarily, right? So first thing that we need to know is that science is a means of production, right? Science becomes a means of production. It constitutes a means of production. The question then, obviously, in 1A is, what is a means of production? And I'm not going to go into sort of the explicit conceptual. You have to forgive me. It's breakfast time. I'm not going to go into the explicit account of exactly what a means of production is. Again, this is a very generalized lecture series just to get your sort of palate wet. A means of production is, quote, the tools and raw materials used to create a product, right? A means of production are the tools and raw materials used to create a product. Right? A means of production are the tools and raw materials that are used to create a product. Okay, so science is a means of production. It is part of this system of production, creating a product. And what are products? In 1B, products are sold for profit. Are sold for profit. Right? Products are sold for profit. So now what we want to do is we want to synthesize the points that we have so far. Science is a means of production. A means of production are the tools and the raw materials that you're going to use in order to create a product. And products are sold for profit. So in synthesis, we can synthesize the following points, right? If it's the case that science is a means of production, and a means of production is used to create products, which we've seen in line 2, and products are sold for profit, then the conclusion that we can derive from this is that science is a means of making a profit, right? Science is a means of making a profit, right? So since science is a means of production, and productions yield products, and products yields profit, then we can say that science yields profit, right? So that science is a means of making profits. Right? Science is a means of making profits. This is very, very important. Right? In the contemporary discourse on the occupation movement, it's important that I hope that people who are participants in the occupation movement recognize the social theory, the social framework in which their movement is situated. This is a very, 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 very old discourse. This is a very old cyclical process, and we are now in the midst of societal transformation if this goes well, right? So in order for it to go well, I think it's important that organizers and participants understand the true nature of their protests, the true nature of their grievances. And the first thing that I want you to recognize, which is very, very important, which hasn't really come to the forefront yet in all of my observation of the occupation movement, is that science is a means of making profits. And this is not my assessment, this is not my analysis, this is very old analysis by Max Horkheimer. Okay, movement-specific note. Now that we find this out, that science is a means of making profit, the point is, if the function of science, right, if the function of science becomes completely co-opted by the drive to maximize profits, and we see how that occurs, right? If the function of science becomes completely co-opted by the drive to maximize profits, science will have, quote-unquote, failed